Welcome back to another week's analysis behind the news. Well, it seems as though every major news outlet in the country is broadcasting the dangers of the West Nile disease. That kind of hits home for us because the chairman of the board of the John Birch Society has contracted it. He has been ill for I think a little over a month if you take the incubation period. He just went home yesterday from the hospital. And he is very debilitated in one of his arms and one of his legs. It takes a long time to recuperate from the West Nile disease if you live. Most people do live, but it's divided into thirds relative to its recovery. About a third recover completely, a third recover partially, and a third never recover and are destined to be in a wheelchair for the rest of their life. But our chairman of the board, Clark Curry, is a very robust individual for his age and fine health. It's the first time he's ever been in the hospital in his life. His attitude and everything else is such that it will work very well towards his recovery. What it is basically a debilitation of the nerves. And what needs to be done is a rebuilding of those connections in the nerves, meanwhile keeping up the tone of the muscles so that they don't atrophy in the process of not being used. So we look forward to the day when Mr. Curry will be back up on his feet and the same individual he was before. He used to swim every day and that sort of thing. So he kept himself in very good shape. But it doesn't matter what shape you're in, like many diseases. It's just a matter of one mosquito with one bite, and there you are. So Dallas and many cities around the Texas and other areas are talking about spraying the cities. You know, we used to do that a lot more than we do now. I know when I was on my city council, we had an awful lot of agitation from environmentalists that we shouldn't be spraying. What we used to do, we had a festival at our town every year, and in order to make it nice and pleasant for everyone, we decided that the town should be sprayed for mosquitoes and that sort of thing for people out in the middle of summer, so that they wouldn't be uncomfortable with mosquito bites and such. Well, we stopped the practice, so the mosquitoes kept coming back more and more and more. Of course, ladies and gentlemen, if we'd kept DDT, a lot of this stuff wouldn't be happening. Because of the problem of banning DDT and its use, it's cheap and it's effective, we are seeing a lot of diseases coming back into human civilization that we didn't have before. So we were concerned about falcons or something like that, but I'm a little more concerned about the human race, if you don't mind. Something else that we've been noticing, particularly over the last week, is a creeping violence again in the Middle East. What we see there is, for instance, Thursday of last week, 100 people alone, at least 100 people alone, were killed in Iraq in various attacks throughout the country. The increase of this violence, and now they attribute it to the resurgence of Al-Qaeda, which we supposedly got rid of in Iraq, which wasn't there before we invaded Iraq, by the way. And so they blame it on that. Another thing that is disturbing is we've just lost another helicopter in Afghanistan, which killed all aboard. This is becoming an increasing problem. It's not yet to the level that the Russians had the problem with it, but it is reminiscent of the things that were going on when the Russians were there, and the Afghanis didn't like them any more than they like us, some of them. And so it remains to be seen what's going to happen there. But at any rate, the whole area is becoming destabilized. We see now that the new chief of staff for the army in Egypt was trained at the War College here in the United States. And while here, he wrote a letter saying that the U.S. should get its forces out of the area and that it was causing a lot of anti-U.S. feeling as a result of being there. And it's pretty obvious that the new president and these changes in the military make it look as if we're going to start having problems with Egypt. So we have all of these things going on in the area. So we learned this morning that we are dependent on Saudi Arabian oil It's up 20% over last year. Up until last year, our dependence on this foreign oil was going down because of things that were going on in the United States. Now, all of a sudden, it's reversed itself, and I would probably say that this is due to the current administration's policies relative to the things that we do when it comes to exploration and getting it out of the ground and refining it and everything else. You can have all the oil you want in your own country, but if you don't have the refineries to refine it, it doesn't do you any good. You can't increase your output. You can increase your crude, but you can't increase your gasoline. And so, meanwhile, as we are getting all this unrest in the area, we're becoming dependent again, more dependent on Saudi oil. Saudi Arabia is not all that stable either. They're starting to have real problems because of the deaths in the royal family and insurgents within their own country that you don't hear much about, but it is on the rise. So I think that depending on foreign oil from a region that is being destabilized, both by the insurgents and, quite frankly, ladies and gentlemen, by us being there stirring it up, is not good for the American economy and everything else, or if we ever go to war. Another thing is that we see the miners in South Africa are up in arms. It says workers police battle in South Africa at a platinum mine, which has caused the price of platinum to go up considerably. Now, in one day, it's about $36 or $40 in one day. The thing that's interesting about this is that I read about it in the Wall Street Journal and and the New York Times, and I learned that the current union that's there, actually this is a battle between two unions, I should mention, and the union that's ensconced there is allied with the ANC, the African National Congress. As I've told you before, the African National Congress is led by members of the Communist Party. So that's the union that's allied to, they are allied to the union that's already there. Another union is coming in trying to ostensibly increase the workers' pay and working conditions. I don't know if that's really what they've got in mind or not, or whether it's just another communist faction fighting each other. I don't know. But that's at least the rhetoric that we're getting. But it's interesting that the communist allied union is the moderates, and the new one that's trying to come in to increase the pay and working conditions of the workers is now referred to as the radical union. I wonder which one it is. Without being on the spot, I don't know. All I know is a bunch of people are killing themselves. And as we've said in this broadcast a couple of weeks ago, the increase in violence in South Africa is a harbinger of things to come, where you will start seeing more and more draconian communist control over the population. It is ruled by communists through the ANC. But they always create a condition to where they have to come down and clamp down police power over the citizens in the name of the violence, in the name of the murders, which in many instances, and most instances, are instigated by the communists themselves. Gives them an excuse, just like Hitler did in Germany. Create violence, you have an excuse for draconian government to restore law and order. The Germans got 100% law and order. What they needed was justice. Simultaneously in Africa, we are starting to see the Chinese news agency, Shenhao, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, is starting to ingratiate itself with the various news services throughout Africa, particularly Central Africa. They're putting out their news services, their dispatches for nothing, for free, to these African news agencies to get them reliant upon them. And we're starting to see actual contractual partnerships now between this communist Chinese news agency and these African news agencies. That is not a harbinger either of good things to come, because what you will start to see is an inculcation of communist propaganda within the various news services and newspapers and everything else that Africans read. It will only lead to problems in the future. And finally, I wanted to talk about the country of Ecuador giving asylum to Assange, the man who is behind WikiLeaks. Now, some of the things in WikiLeaks is good and some of it is very, very bad. But the interesting thing I find about it is that Ecuador is ruled by a communist leader now. And so they are giving asylum to Assange. So I find that, as I said, very interesting, and I would like to look a little bit more into the background of these individuals in WikiLeaks. We have used some of WikiLeaks stuff ourselves because it's been very important, but in other cases I know that the stuff they put out was detrimental to the intelligence community, and that's always a bad thing. At any rate, we'll see you next week.